Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Lori Hawkins of Bristol is the Democratic candidate in the 21st Senate District. Lori, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me.
You say on your campaign website that Wisconsin has one of the fastest shrinking middle classes in the nation.
Yep.
If you're elected as one state senator, where would you start to address that?
That's a really good question. That's honestly one of the reasons why I'm running for state office, because I've seen changes happening in our state over the last 7 years or so. Our tax on our public schools, taking away workers' rights, and that's all contributing to the fact that our middle class is disappearing. We need to start by bringing worker protections back and to make sure that workers' rights are restored. We know that when union jobs are strong, that other forms of jobs are strong as well. So in order to strengthen our middle class, we need to take care of our working families and make sure that they have opportunities for economic growth.
What should the minimum wage be in Wisconsin?
You know, that's a question that I get all the time, and I don't think that we can just tack on a number and say, you know, we haven't raised our minimum wage in years and years and years, and it's not a living wage. So our minimum wage has to be a wage that people can live on. And when thinking about that, we also have to figure in healthcare costs, maybe healthcare insurance. Are we willing to give a little bit in salary in order to have more benefits? These are things where we need our legislators to sit down together and iron things out.
We're only a few miles from the site of the proposed Foxconn campus. You've heard Governor Walker say that those jobs over there will be not well-paying, but will pay a good wage. I think like $53,000 or something.
That's what he said.
Your position on Foxconn?
Foxconn is a complicated issue, and a lot of people, when I'm doing doors all over the district, a lot of people ask about, you know, Foxconn and give their opinions. I think the consensus is that we made historic steps by offering one of the biggest corporate, or the biggest corporate tax giveaway in U.S. history here with Foxconn. So here they are, they're promising all these jobs. That remains to be seen. What I can tell you is that $4.5 billion is a lot of money in tax giveaways. And it's not a pot of money that we're giving to them, but we are going to have to wait 20, 25 years to see a return on this investment. You know, meanwhile, our schools need to be funded, our roads need to be fixed, people need health care. That's a problem. So I think that what we also need to consider is Foxconn is a large presence in our community. It's here. We need to ensure that they're going to be good neighbors to us. And by that I mean make sure that they make good on the promises that they've kept by bringing good paying jobs into our district. But also we need to consider the concerns of, for example, residents of Mount Pleasant who are looking at eminent domain issues and blighted properties. We need to look at all the water that's being taken out of Lake Michigan and looking at our wetlands and make sure they're being protected. So, you know, we need to have watchdogs, I guess, in Madison to make sure that Foxconn is being a good neighbor instead of people who are rubber stamping for big business there.
Your opponent voted for Foxconn. Is this election a referendum on Foxconn, or is that too simplistic a question? I
think it's too simplistic. I'm sure that for everybody who was making the decision about Foxconn at the Capitol, that it was complicated, like it is now, and it's hard to say no to the prospect of jobs coming in. So no, I wouldn't. I would say that that's a more simplistic view. I think that it's more. I think we can say that it's maybe a referendum on favoring big business over our citizens, though.
Your campaign site refers to handouts to foreign companies. Does that a sign that you would have voted against the Foxconn tax package?
It's easy for me to sit here as not having to have made the decision and say what I would or what I wouldn't have done. So I can't really say that. What I can say is, again, we need to make sure that the promises that are being kept, or the promises that have been made by Foxconn, not even promises, but what they've proposed that they could do for our community is something that they actually do. We need to hold them accountable.
The Foxconn package was one reason Kimberly Clark asked for similar tax breaks.
Right.
How would you vote on a Kimberly Clark package?
Well, I mean, because I live in the land of Foxconn right now, where they are, that's something that I've been focusing on. I mean, if elected, and I would definitely have to, do more research into that. That's another big issue. And like I said, accepting the Foxconn package and that big tax giveaway, that was a dangerous precedent, and we're seeing the effects of that already with Kimberly Clark.
You said one big issue is our public schools. Now, the current state budget did include more than $600 million more for K-12 public schools. But are they still underfunded? Do we need another big increase in the next budget?
Yeah, they're still underfunded. I believe that, we've had historic tax cuts to our public schools over the last 7 years at the state level. And what you're talking about is going to maybe bring it back up to where it would have been. But in the meantime, our school buildings are needing repairs, and we've cut programming in schools. So it's not enough to just go back to about where we were. It's like when you don't pay your bill, it keeps coming due and it gets more expensive, and that's what's happened with our public schools. And a really good example of that is my daughter's public high school. Really good school, and they've held on so far with not having to really cut a lot of staff up until now, but this school year they had to cut 7 full-time employees, 4 of them were full-time teachers, and of those 4, 3 of them were STEM teachers. So, on one hand, we're talking about the importance of science, technology, engineering and math in our schools, and on the other hand, those are the positions we cut. That's getting very lean.
The Voucher the Choice program expanded from Milwaukee to Racine, and now it's statewide. How has it worked out in Racine?
I can speak to not Racine specifically, but I will tell you that when I was a Milwaukee public school teacher, that was pretty much the beginning of bringing school choice to Milwaukee. So what I saw as a teacher in a struggling MPS middle school was that we would have students leave in the hopes of finding a better solution at a voucher school, and the money would follow them, the funding would follow them to the voucher school, and then when they would find that school wasn't serving their needs, they would come back to the public school, but the money didn't follow the students back. So with the voucher program, what we're seeing is taking public tax dollars, which are not going into our public schools, and funding private voucher schools. By the way, the voucher schools get more per student in tax dollars than our public schools do. And also they have lower level of accountability. So I'm seeing this as a deliberate siphoning off of public funds to or tax dollars to public schools in the hopes that the voucher schools, will succeed. But in the end, our public schools should have the opportunity to be the best choice for our students. And with the defunding of them constantly, they'll never have that opportunity. We need to put our faith back in public schools and our teachers so that we can retain excellent teachers and go back to a place where Wisconsin used to be leading public education in our nation.
The impasse, the gridlock in the Capitol over how we pay for our highways, bridges, construction, maintenance in the future, how should it be resolved? How would you like it resolved?
Well, I mean, the problem is that we don't have a sustainable transportation plan in place right now. We've been kicking the can down the road for years, not taking care of our roads, and they're a mess. I mean, it's something that people talk about at the doors all the time. I've had people just, I'd say, what's your main issue? And they'll say, turn around and look at my street. And it's something that we laugh about, but it's really not funny. What we need to do is look at all the options out there. We need to, what's interesting to me is we have one party in charge of all levels of government in our state, and they haven't been able to agree on a plan. They haven't been able to agree on a study in order to address different plans. So what we need to do is elect people to office who are willing to look at all the options. We need to look at a wheel tax. We need to look at a gas tax. We need to look at tolls, and then figure out what the best option is. I mean, my opponent likes to point toward the I-94 corridor and say, we're working on this, which is true. But we have so many state highways and main thoroughfares in our state roads that need attention as well.
Local governments have lived with levy limits for 14, 15 years. Some local government leaders say that hurts their ability to provide local services. Yeah. Keep levy limits to hold down property taxes, loosen them, get rid of them?
Well, I think what the problem here is that the state has taken away a lot of local government control. If you talk to Americans, 71% of Americans say that they trust their local governments to cover municipal issues rather than the state government. And it just makes sense that people who are living in the vicinity of what's going on can make better decisions about it. So I would argue that we need to give local control back to local communities. And I mean, the state government has enough to take care of at the state level. Let's let the municipalities take care of their own. And as far as levies go, you know, we just talked about cuts to public education. So, you know, the communities are doing the right thing and saying, okay, you know what, we're gonna fund this ourselves. We're going to put a referendum on the ballot so that we can, you know, fix the leaky roof, bring back the lunch program that, you know, we want in our school, whatever it is. And now they're having limits put on even how often they can put those school referendums on the ballot. So that's really stymieing our communities from being able to help themselves.
Another one of the top issues you identified is health care. Let me ask the question this way. How can we protect and maybe expand health care in rural Wisconsin?
Yeah, that's a big issue. So there's a lot of rural areas in the 21st Senate District, and that is, I would say, for sure, one of the top 3 issues that people talk about when I'm knocking doors all over the district, whether it's the urban part of the district or the rural part. And for example, one man who I talked to at his door was telling me that he works 3 part-time jobs instead of a full-time job. And it was the 3 part-time jobs paid more than any full-time job that he could find. So
3?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So he works, you know, 40 plus hours a week, 3 different jobs. His wife works, instead of full-time, 1 part-time job because she found that if she worked full-time, they'd have to pay for childcare, and that was very expensive. Okay? So she was home when the kids were home, and she either worked when they were at school or asleep. So between the 2 of them, they have 4 jobs. Because they're all part-time, none of them offer employer-paid health care, so they turn to Badger Care. And what this constituent told me is that his disappointment in Governor Walker was that he said no thank you to the Medicaid expansion, which was like $1 billion in health care that could have come our way to expand Badger Care coverage. And that's a problem. And I had trouble figuring out why we would say no to that. We're the only upper Midwest state that said no to Medicaid expansion. And the only reason I could come up with is that, you know, our governor doesn't like the ACA. His party wanted to repeal it. And right now our governor and our attorney general are embroiled in a lawsuit with the federal government that we're paying for because they want to be able to kick people off their insurance if they have a pre-existing condition. So don't take the expansion. Don't let people with a pre-existing condition have health care. What we need to do is, first of all, say yes to expanding Badger Care if we ever get the opportunity to. And then also, we need to make sure that our community health centers are kept alive and well. In rural areas, options are scarce. We need to keep our community health centers open, and that includes Planned Parenthood. I mean, those clinics take care of more than 50% of Planned Parenthood patients are rural. And that takes the load off of community health care healthcare centers when it comes to preventative care for reproductive health care, Pap tests and other cancer screenings and STD treatment. So I think we need to keep all of our options open for our communities in rural areas.
Have you heard from hospitals and other medical providers that Wisconsin has low Medicaid reimbursement rates? Are you worried that we may be hitting a tipping point in those low rates, hurting health care for our MA patients?
Yeah, I think the problem here is that we are not drawing providers into our marketplace. And one way to do that is to make our communities stronger, to, just like any kind of employer, to make people more willing to come into our communities, you know, and that goes back to strengthening our public schools, goes back to giving more economic opportunities to our working families so that our communities are seen as more attractive places for all kinds of businesses to come in, including healthcare.
State government and Delta Dental are piloting a program that provides dental care to low-income residents and regional clinics.
Right.
Should that be a priority in the next MA budget?
I think so. I know that in the schools, when my kids were little, dentists would come in and teach kids about oral hygiene, and there's so much that rides on dental health, gum disease, just kids who have healthy teeth and gums and adults are less likely to have other diseases. So that preventative care, I think, definitely would benefit our communities in the long run, health-wise, but also financially, because healthier communities are more economically sound.
As you campaign, are you hearing about an issue from caregivers? AARP estimates that 578,000 Wisconsin residents are caregivers for family members or neighbors.
Yeah.
Would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when someone they loved is hospitalized?
I would. And I think for many people, including me, this hits close to home. When we moved into the district a little over a dozen years ago, my mother became ill with early onset dementia, frontal lobe dementia. And at that time, I had decided to take some time off of work to help raise her, just to be home with our kids. And I had intended to go back soon, but because my mom was ill and in a place where she couldn't go to the doctor on her own, she needed somebody to advocate for her. I stayed out of work longer so that I could be there to help her navigate her health care. And yeah, it helps when a family member is seen as an active participant in the healthcare decisions, and so yes, I would support that.
Big issue in the next budget, the Department of Corrections budget. We have 2 prisons that were built in the 1800s. You've heard some of the Democratic candidates for governor say we could cut our prison population in half over X number of years.
Yeah.
Do we need a new state prison?
Yep, our prisons are old, we're overcrowded, we have racial inequities in our prisons. There's a lot of stuff to look at. Rather than just building a new prison, I think we need to look at our whole criminal justice system. Make sure that we are making sure that we're serving our communities as well as we can through it. I think we need to look at who we're sending to prison, why we're sending them there, and how long they're staying, and look at other options, perhaps.
The bills in the Capitol that would legalize both recreational and medical marijuana, your positions?
I think it's time to legalize medical marijuana. One of the reasons is once we do, we can do more research to find out what other benefits there would be or other dangers, but we'd be able to do studies once we legalize. And as far as recreational, it's going to be on the ballot in Racine in November, and I'm interested to see how people vote on it. And then, once they do, let's go from there. I'm not adverse to looking into full legalization, but I feel like we're kind of behind the curve in Wisconsin, and one step at a time.
The state created a $100 million fund for school safety. As a former teacher, is it enough, or do we need to change gun laws?
Well, I believe that it's time to bring back some good sense gun laws into our communities. Yes, we need to keep our kids safe. And I will tell you that after, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shooting, my kids were fearful to go to school. I don't think the answer is arming teachers. I think the answer is to be more careful with who has guns. And I'm talking about, yes, universal background checks. I'm talking about reinstilling a waiting period on buying guns, and just working together instead of everybody staying in their corners when it comes to gun laws, and coming up with some real solutions to show that we really do want to protect our kids.
You've mentioned some differences with the incumbent you're opposing. Any other differences you want to highlight?
Well, I think one major difference between the two of us is I really believe, and maybe it's the teacher in me, maybe it's the mom in me, I don't know, but something that's really important to me is talking to people to find out what's important to them and how they want to be governed. the voice of our citizens is what should drive legislation. And my opponent favors special interests and big business. And an example of that is the dark store loophole. You know, just a little bit about that. That's when big box stores like Walmart and Walgreens are not, don't pay their fair share of property taxes because of a loophole. And then that burden is shifted on to our homeowners and our small businesses, and that's been a big concern. People at the doors are fearful about, you know, they don't know what the tax bill is going to look like at the end of the year. And my opponent had 2 opportunities when this was brought to the floor to vote against it, and he didn't. And it's because he favors the WMC, the Wisconsin Merchants and Commerce, or Manufacturers and Commerce, and over protecting citizens from paying just their fair share of property taxes instead of and shouldering more than their fair share and giving breaks to corporations.
Lori Hawkins of Bristol is a Democratic candidate in the 21st Senate District. The election is November 6th. Thank you for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.